Admin and the Tech Crash Course. My name is Julie Perrine. I'm the founder and CEO of All Things Admin, and we are very pleased to have you joining us for today's webinar. The Admin Tech Crash Course is a technology-focused training program for busy professionals, and our goal with each session is to create a crash course on the relevant technology topics that you need to stay current on the technology and software you use each day, so that you can ultimately be more productive and proficient in everything you do. Let me introduce today's webinar, Creating Useful Forms in Microsoft Word 2013, presented by Donna Gilliland of mosttraining.com. Donna's career in technology began back when DOS was the king of computer operating systems for the personal computer. Floppies were actually still floppy, and the internet had just begun to explode. At that time in her career, there were no training companies. You either learned it on your own or went back to school to learn all about it, and Donna did both. Her career in the corporate world started as an executive assistant, and she worked in a programming department supporting a staff of programmers and the VP of IT. But that was just the beginning. Over time, she realized she had an aptitude for learning software technologies and the ability to communicate to others in terms that all could understand. And her love of helping people, business, and technology made a great fit for her future career in teaching and speaking. Today, Donna is an award-winning technology instructor, certified technology trainer, and the president of Most Training. Please join me in a warm virtual welcome for Donna Gilliland. Welcome, Donna.
Thank you, Julie. Okay, we're going to get started. And as Julie said, it's Forms 101. Now, while it is Forms 101, I think you're going to feel like by conclusion that maybe you even got a little Forms 102 in the process. So here's what I'd like to do first. I want to go over just a few things on Forms Overview and then how you began getting started with forms. Now, some of you in the audience, you may be coming from a background of creating forms in older versions of Word prior to Word 2007. So I'll cover a little bit of that today. But here are some things you want to keep in mind that I have on my screen. Of course, with forms, you can create paper versions as well as the electronic versions where people can fill them out from within Word. And the latter is probably what many of you want the most, is that ability to fill it out from within Word. So when you create forms, which we'll do today, forms can have various form fields, and this is an important part that I want you to keep in mind. I'm operating in Office 2013 today. You might have 2010 or 2007. So keep this in mind under the Forms Bulleted item here. Content controls, which you're going to learn about today, which you'll work with primarily today, content controls. They were introduced in Microsoft Word 2007. But within our new Office, which started at 2007, we were given by Microsoft legacy form fields, which I'm going to go over today. And those legacy form fields, they're needed for backward compatibility. So that means that if you were creating a form in one of your newer versions of Word, and that form needs to be used, needs to be saved out as a lower version, as in Word 97 2003, then you need the legacy form fields. Then the last part that before we dive in is that before you start creating forms, you need to turn on the Developer tab, because the Developer tab isn't on by default, because on our ribbon it ends with the View tab. So I'm going to start by doing exactly that. And you know, if you want to turn on your Developer tab, you can. You're welcome to do anything you'd like hands-on as long as it doesn't distract you from what's being delivered here. So that's up to you. But here's what's needed first. First, you would need to go to the Quick Access toolbar. So I don't know where yours is parked. You can have it as the default in the top left, or yours may be below the ribbon. But you need to click the down arrow at the very end. So I'm moving up toward my screen, and the down arrow at the end of the Quick Access toolbar, when you click, you need to go next to More Commands. All this are the steps needed for us to turn on that Developer tab. So go to More Commands, and then when you arrive, on the left-hand side of the categories of choices, you want to choose Customize Ribbon. Once you choose Customize Ribbon, look to the far right, because to the far right are ribbons that are already turned on, the ones that are default to the program. But as you look on down, there's one unchecked that says Developer, and you need to check mark Developer. After you choose Developer, lower right corner, click on OK, and then if you look back at my screen or yours, if you're doing this activity with me, there's the Developer tab. And that is what we are going to work with for the duration of your training, is the Developer ribbon. And the Developer tab gets us there. So I'll go ahead and choose Developer. And now here I am in the Developer ribbon. I do want you to know, if you don't already, that creating forms can be very complex. It depends upon whether or not you want to do some back-end programming with it. That's not our focus today, but there is a lot that you can do with making your forms interactive. But today we're going to focus on basic form creation. I think you're going to be happy with what you learn even in this. All right, so let me get to a document. This is a document that Julie sent originally to you today. It's in everything that was sent. And as Julie mentioned earlier, you don't have to have this document up. But I'm going to use it as a starting point, so you'll have familiarity, so that if you go back to use this as a practice point, then you can. This sample that's with your handout is a weekly progress report for students. Now I'm going to be flipping over to something different in a moment, but a few things that you need to prepare for when you start to create a form, if this is your first time to start creating forms. You do need a knowledge of Microsoft Office tables. You need a knowledge of, at some point in time, of working with creating a template. And then also what's going to be helpful, because you're going to see it in use today, is that if you do not know how to use building blocks, which is the ability to save content that you can reuse over and over again, whether that's a block of a paragraph, an image, etc. Today you're going to learn how to put in building block controls. And so if you've been using this feature, which we did an event on recently, which is saving time with auto text, and when you use that, then you can have a building block control, and you can choose from content that's stored within your template. So the point to this is just that you will have to know a variety of things to take your forms creation to a higher level. So first, let's start off with this document I have in front of me. It is in table form, this one is. And as you look up at the top of my screen, it does say Table Tools, Design, Layout, because it is in a table. In this practice document, if you go back to use it, what they've done is they have placed for you the word student at various points where you could go in and put in a control. And then they have some controls such as check boxes. So let's go ahead and I'll get started here. For this one where it says student has been consistently on time and there's a check mark, you could put in a control for the name. So at the very basic level, and let me get to the developer ribbon. So now I'm on the developer ribbon, and I'm going to replace this placeholder text with a form field. So where we're going to focus today, on the developer ribbon, we're focusing in the controls group. You'll learn the majority of what's there. So let's start from the top. From the top, you have a rich text content control. 2 A's are there, but if you'll notice, the 2 A's are bold, where the 2 A's to the right is also a text content control, but it's plain text. So the difference between the two is rich text will let you format within, and plain text doesn't. So I'm going to go ahead and choose rich text control. And then when you look at my screen, I'm going to make it a little larger for you. Maybe you can see better. There we go. Now you can see that there is a small button with triple dots because I now have a control. Now this control, I need to change the properties of it. So the control is there for placing text, but as you look at my controls group, there is a button for properties. And when you choose properties, you can title your control. We won't be using the tag feature today, and it's not relative to what you're learning. And I'm going to go ahead and just put in a title for the moment because we will cover more of the options that are in this box. I'm going to put in student name and click on OK. And now if you look where I'm pointing, the control itself says student name. And just to give you some point of reference, if you've ever used any of the pre-built options in Microsoft Word, for example, cover page, if you've ever inserted one of the default cover pages that's in Microsoft Word, it's filled with control objects that you fill in. And so this is a control object, and now I've named it student name. But I want to change the text that's here, and again, on the developer ribbon, in the controls, you have a design mode button. So if I choose design mode, what this does is it opens up that control that I have placed, and then you can change the substitution text that's there. In the creator of this baseline get started form, they put the word student, but you could put whatever you wanted to appear in the control that guides that person as to what they are to do. So I'm going to put in enter full student name. Then clicking design mode takes me back out of seeing that full field expanded. So the point here is that one of the benefits of you toggling back and forth between design mode is being able to change any default text that a control provides when you create it. So now it does say enter student full name. And then I could go throughout the form putting in something as basic as a rich text content control, so I can format, or just a plain text control. So that's at the basic level of using that. Now if you come down below, looking at my screen, on the left there's another place to put a student control. I think you get the idea. But then there are also checkbox options. And they have one checkbox option here, and here's how they put this in. Returning to controls, in the second row, you have an option for checkbox content control. And by clicking, the control pops up, and then again, you would repeat these processes of changing properties of controls that you have. So I'll go ahead and choose properties. And I can choose to put in a title. Now, while I'm in this box, this is a good time to cover a few other things because we're going to pick up the speed here in a moment on you learning a lot more in depth. But as you look at the properties box, there are some things at today's level you need to know. There's an option down below that says show as a bounding box, and there is an option to show none. So it's a matter of whether or not you want to see the control like we have it, where there's a box around it. Let me show you. See, there's a box around, not the little box. The little box is your check mark box, but every control, when you enter it, it has a box surrounding it. So if you don't want that bounding box, as they call it, to be displayed to your user of the form, then in the properties you can choose to have none. Leave mine, bounding box. Then there's an option for color, so you can choose colors for your controls. Then the option says beneath says use a style to format the text typed into the empty control. Now this is important because you can control how it looks by choosing styles that are already built into Microsoft Office Word. So by check marking, use a style to format text typed into the empty control. Then you'll have a drop-down list of options. And in this particular one that I'm using, I have the option to use a heading 1 style. So if you're familiar with using styles in Microsoft Word, you know what heading 1 gives you, which is a pre-built format with several different formats built all into the one style. The second option, or third one down here, it says remove content control when contents are edited. Now what that means is if you are creating this form for somebody else to use, if you choose this option, remove content control when contents are edited, it simply means after something's placed in the control, then the control box won't be there anymore. What will be left behind is whatever they entered. In this case, they're just check marking. Then there's a locking option. So if you're sending this form out to a user, the locking options are content control cannot be deleted, contents cannot be edited. So once you choose content control cannot be edited, then they can't click on it and then accidentally delete it. Now keep this in mind for yourself as the creator. When you need to open that form back up to make edits, you can't delete the control either unless you come back into the properties and uncheck mark the content control cannot be deleted. And then there's the option contents cannot be edited. So if you had something where they have to provide information, an answer of a specific type, you don't want them to be able to go back and delete that, then that's what this option is for. Down below, since we're working with a checkbox control, you have different properties at the bottom. And before we work with those properties, I want you to keep this in mind about properties. Many of your controls have the same properties, and then some controls, while they have the same properties as others, they have some properties others don't have. And the checkbox is one of those. As you look below, the checkbox properties are to either have that checkbox already checked at use or to have it in an unchecked state when you're using the form. I'm going to go ahead and click on OK. Now if you'll notice, my control has an orange box around it because I chose the color orange. But if I go back to properties, I'm still on the developer ribbon, still in controls, and choose properties, where it says show as bounding box. If I click the down arrow and choose none and click on OK, see there is no box around the control. So it's a matter of what you want a user to see on a form that they're using. So right now what you're getting is, at first, this glance into the different options, and then we're going to ramp up the speed here. I'll go back to the developer ribbon. I'm coming over to a different form for us to work with. We can start using some of these. In this form, it is actually a template. And the template can be used for people to create new proposals. So if I have people working with me to give customers proposals, then you and myself, we can create templates that have these controls in them to make it easier for the person who's creating a document off the template, so that they will already have controls that they need to make that document creation a lot quicker. So we're going to try out some of these. In this template that I have open, I want the template to have a proposal date, and I want it to have a date picker. So on a form, you can add a date picker. You need to be where you want the control to go, back to the developer ribbon, back to the controls group, and among the controls, in the second row, last choice is a date picker content control. And when you click, you get that standard looking control with the default text that says click here to enter a date. Just remember that from the developer ribbon, if you go into design mode, then you can change the text that appears in the default. All right, so let me go back. I'm turning off design mode. And here's the down arrow for the proposal date. And there is a date picker. So by inserting that content control, you're going to give that user, including yourself if you're using the template, to pick dates from a date picker. And there it displays. Now, on that control, since it is a date picker, I'm going back to the controls group to choose the properties. Because in the properties, you have options for, as you do all the controls, titling what that control should say. It's a matter of preference in some situations. And then it's down below that's important. Because this is a date picker, it has a different set of properties at the bottom. And you can choose how the date is displayed when the date's chosen from the date picker. The default is to display it in a month, double-digit day, 4-digit year. And you can choose from a different format if you prefer. And down below, you have the option to change the locale as from United States to something else, and then there's a calendar type that you can choose from. So just be aware of your properties. So let's move to another control type. This next one is going to be a control type for a client typing in the client, which I've already placed, but I'm going to delete it and then insert the control. And I want this one to be rich text because I do want to be able to bold and make other changes. From the controls, you saw this demonstrated earlier, I'll go ahead and choose Rich Text Control. And it generically says, click here to enter text, and I'm going to change that by going to the design mode and type client name here. Turn off design mode. And then on properties, choosing properties for this particular type control, it doesn't have as many properties as the others do. But it does have the option for color and style. And I'm going to choose the option content control cannot be deleted. My suggestion to you would be that if you are creating these for someone else to use, I would suggest that you apply that property so they don't accidentally delete the control that you've provided. And then below, I have this quote, unique to client. I won't fill another form in. You get the idea. So I would be going through that template and applying the controls that I want in the template that I want users to create their document from. And there's a place here for date. And again, these would be replaced with your controls. Now on the next one that you're going to learn is how that you can add a building block control. Now a building block control, in fact, let me demonstrate something for you, and just in case you haven't used the building blocks before, I'm going to select this text, and in a prior webinar that Julie and I did, we taught how to use this feature for creating quick parts. So this text I'm selecting, and I could say that as a quick part, and which I've done, and I won't be describing the details of that today because today's about forms. So if you are knowledgeable of using quick parts and you've created a library of quick parts, then you can insert them into your template, and then when you send the template out to everyone, you can have a building block control where that user can just click the control to pick the building block. But there's several steps involved, and we're headed to those steps. Now, terms of service. I'm going to insert a building block control where I can have the user select from a list of building blocks that I have inside this template. From the developer ribbon, in the controls group, we're going to do a content control. And this is for building block. This is in the top row, last icon, building block gallery content control. So when you click, you get the usual generic name. But when you insert a building block, you have to then change the properties of the block so that you can specify which building block category that you want the user to pull from. And this is assuming you've created all of this. So I'll go ahead and choose the properties. So I've got properties. And I'm going to type in terms and then down below at the very bottom, this is the important part about you using a building block control. In the properties, there's an option to choose which gallery of building block that you want to use. I'm going to click the down arrow, and afterwards you have all these different building blocks that are unique to Microsoft Office Word. And if what I'm explaining at the moment doesn't have clarity for you on the building block side, it's because this class does assume a knowledge of using quick parts. Now in my case, I'm going to choose from the auto text gallery that I have created. So I'm going to choose auto text. Now auto text is a gallery that's within Microsoft Word, but you can then store content to that gallery. Now after I choose that this information is coming from the auto text gallery, I can then pick the category. Now I created a custom category for webinars, and that's what is listed here in this particular template. And I didn't do a terms in this one, so let me do a terms of service. Let me put a quick part in here. This one didn't have it, so I'll go ahead and drop it in. This has nothing to do with control. This has to do with me not having this section in my quick parts list in this template when I last saved it. So I'm just going to do this very quickly on the fly. So I'm choosing this text, and from the insert ribbon I'm going to my quick parts, and I'm going to choose save selection to quick part gallery. And then I'm going to name this one. And on the gallery, it's going to quick parts, but I want it to be in my auto text list. And then from the category, it's at general. I'll go ahead and create one since I'm already here, and you can get a quick look into creating a quick part. I'm going to create a category, and I'm just going to call it terms of service. In the future, if I had more terms of service and they varied by proposal, I could pick from the blocks that I've created. Now notice that in this box it says Save In. I'm in a template, and because I'm in a template called Most Social Proposal, then I have the choice for where this gets saved. I do want it to be retained in this template. So let me go back to the building block and go back to the properties on the developer ribbon. There we go. I'm choosing at the bottom of the properties that the gallery where the part is that I have previously saved, that I'm choosing the gallery, which is auto text. Then in the category, I'm choosing from the categories that I have already created in this template, and I'm going to choose terms of service. And keep this in mind. in this category I created called Terms of Service, as I said before, I might have 3 or 4 or 5 different paragraphs because Terms of Service could vary by the project. And because I've chosen this, now when I click on OK, when this document in the future, the proposal, is created from the template and a user enters into this box, when they click the down arrow for auto text, they would be presented with every block of content that you have created that you placed in that specific category for auto text. I just have the one. I'm going to choose that option, the pay terms, and see the block comes inside. Now, if you're worried about there's a box around this, is that how it's going to print? If you look at this in Print Preview, it just has the information. That bounding box, as it's called, is displayed when you're in that mode of editing your form. But it would not show in print mode. And I'm going to change the name of that control by going to the properties. I'm going to call in, I'll put in. And now the button says Insert Terms of Service, because when you're creating these forms, when you're creating them for someone else, you want to make it as crystal clear as you can, and the default names for controls don't always guide us clearly in the right direction. So here I have Insert Terms of Service, and that is a lot more clear, has more clarity than the other one, and then from there I can choose from my building blocks that I have stored to my auto text. So now you know what a building block control is. So if you do, for example, different contracts and you have boilerplates of information, if you haven't already learned to use building blocks, the tool, to create time-saving ways to grab what you need to do that. And I believe Julie has that particular webinar on her list of options on her website. All right, so now you know about the building block. Let's go to another option. The next 2 control types you're going to learn is how to create a combo box or a list box. And what you need to know, I'll make my screen larger, this information I've typed here. I want you to keep this in mind, and then I'll create the controls. A combo box control, it will display a list of values, but the difference between a combo box and a list box is the ability for a user to enter other values than what's in the list. If you create a combo box, you'll still have your list of values that you program in or type in. You're not going to have to program anything. You'll just type these in, and then it allows the user to enter other values. In a list box, you just get the list. They can't enter anything else in. So now I'll demonstrate that from the developer ribbon. In the controls, second row, there's an option for combo content, and then next to it, to the right, is the list. So the one you choose depends upon what kind of flexibility you want. So if you want to restrict it to just the list, it would be a list box. But I'll go ahead and choose combo box. And up comes the control. I'm going to go in design mode and change that text. And out of design mode. And now here comes the part where you add the options to your list, and that's done in the properties. From developer back to properties, while in this control, and then down below, the property for this box. And keep in mind your locking options. Content control cannot be deleted. As I said before, I would choose that to protect the controls, but it's down at the bottom that's important to you right now, and that's how you get your items into the list. So at the bottom, you have on the right an add button, and you'll begin that process of typing every item that should be in their list. I'm going to choose Facebook. And if you look in the box where it says drop-down list properties, it shows what the name of it will be and what the value will be from that list. And then I'll add just 2 more, and it's just a repeat process. This one will be Instagram. And I'll add 1 more for Pinterest. And then you would keep doing that. Then click on OK. And the control does say social media option. And clicking the down arrow, it does say Facebook, Instagram, Pinterest. And when an option is chosen, it will appear on the within the document. When you need to edit, maybe you need to add more items and or remove items, it goes back to properties. So we'll go back to properties, and if I clicked on Pinterest in the list and the properties, then the buttons on the right will light up and become an option so that I can modify, remove, or I may want to reorder these, put them in a completely different order, and you have a move up and a move down option. And as far as the combo box goes, the procedure for creation is exactly the same as it is for a list box. The only difference, as stated moments ago, is whether or not you want someone to be able to add to the list or not. Now I'll go ahead and click on OK just to get back. So just don't forget these key points here. All right, let's move on to the next one. Hopefully you're getting some good ideas for how to create forms. All right. Now the next piece is on how to use the feature called repeating controls. Repeating controls. And that's what we're about to cover here. The controls option, repeating controls, is in the controls group. It is the last row of options, and it says repeat section content control. And here's an example of why you would need to repeat a control. If in, say, this proposal, I wanted to give the person who's utilizing the template to create a document to create a control for typing in a social media channel, just a straight text, rich text field. But I wanted that person to be able to add another option. They can repeat that control. There will be a plus sign that allows them to repeat the control. I'm going to put in a table for this. Keep in mind that a table is not a requirement for what I'm about to do, but since I want to have multiple line items, then I do want a table for this. I'm going to do just a quick one. Insert, just a quick one table. Of course, you want to dress this up, make it look good, size it accordingly. And I'm going to put inside the table a control, developer ribbon. I am going to put in a rich text control. And now, if I leave it like it is, and the person using this wanted to be able to type in a list of other social media management options the company offers, right now there's only one control to type one thing in. And if I wanted to give the person the ability to add another without having to recreate the control, then I can choose the repeating option for the control. So going back to developer, I'm on the control. In the controls group, again, last row, first option says repeating section content control. And I'll go ahead and click. Now when you click, the text inside changes. Just that it's a text that explains what a repeating control is. It's saying enter any content you want to repeat, including other content controls, and that you can also insert this control around table rows in order to repeat parts of the table. We're not doing that last part today, but the text that's here, you might decide that this text explains well what that person's supposed to do, but if it doesn't, I would change that text. But here's what you want to focus on. Having chosen that option to repeat that control that I added, what I have now is a plus sign. That's what the user will have. And each time they click the plus sign, they'll get another rich content control, at least in this case because that's the one I added, but it could have been some other type of control that you wanted to add. And of course, you can change this text. Me personally, I would probably change this specific text. So here's how it would work. I'll change the title so it makes more sense. And in the controls, I'm going to the properties. I'll title this control. So now, if I click the plus sign to the right, let me go ahead and type something in. So I've typed in Instagram. So whoever's using the form, and this person needs to type in 3 different social media options, as in the rich text control. Once that first option's typed in, then you've given that user the ability to add another control of rich content type. That's what we're working with. So now if I click the plus sign to the far right, and that's only here now because I chose the option to repeat the control. So I'll click plus, and I get another control where I can type in another option. So that's why you would use the repeating option on the developer ribbon. And that plus sign will always appear there. Keep this in mind, though. Once you insert that control, the ability to add another one is always in its control of that first control. Here's the plus sign, because if I click in this next one, there's not a plus sign. If I click plus again, then I'll get another row and can key in another option. Now, before I go any further, and I do want to cover legacy controls with you, there are several things to cover right now. With this template that is in process, if I want to prevent anyone from keying in anywhere in the form other than the controls that I've added, then you can place the document in protect mode, and then any form fields that you've added are the only places that typing can be performed. And here's how that would work. This can be started from the developer ribbon. And in the developer ribbon, you have a protect group with a restrict editing button. Once you click restrict editing, a pane opens on the right-hand side. So here on the right-hand side, you have an option that says formatting restrictions, limit formatting to a selection, and there is a link for settings. So if I choose limit formatting to a selection of styles, this part that I'm explaining, it doesn't have anything to do with what I stated earlier, which is that I want to protect the form so that the only thing that can be made use of would be the controls. But we need to cover these restrict editing options. If I choose limit formatting to a selection, then there's a settings option where at the top left I can choose limit formatting to a selection of styles, and this would simply mean that I can uncheck what I would not want someone to be able to change within my template here, my form. I won't go over that in detail because we could spend a good amount of time on that, and we can cover that in a secondary training. But here's the main focus, is the ability to lock this down completely as described, and that would be number 2. Number 2 is for editing restrictions, and it has an option that says allow only this type of editing in this document. There's a drop-down list. Mine is set to filling in forms, but when you click the down arrow, there's an option for track changes, which we won't cover today, comments, filling in forms, and no changes, read only. In our case, I want to restrict this to just filling in the form. Once that's chosen, you have to execute it by choosing the option in this pane on the right that says, yes, start enforcing protection. And then when you do, you'll be presented with a box where you can password protect. And I would suggest that you give some thought about utilizing the password protect. If you're sending your template out to everyone that has all the controls in it, you might not want them to be making changes to the form. And they can turn off protection very easily. It's just a click of a button. And if you apply a password and the person attempts to stop the protection, they would have to key in the password before they could stop the protection. I'm going to bypass it for us today. Now, I'm at the top of this proposal, and I am attempting to work with the words proposal date, and I can't. It is popping me into the control. Down in the paragraph where it says, please just submit a proposal to client name, I try to get in here and change the text. I can't. It automatically pops me to that control. Get the idea? So now, if you were creating a template like you're seeing today, when you get all these things in place and you've applied the restriction, then you would need to make certain that you save your document that you're creating out as a template if that's your intent, to use this as a template that others would create a document from. I also want to make sure that it's clear in your mind that you don't have to have a template to create a form. I mean, you can open up a blank document and you can begin creating the design and the layout and all the fields that you want someone to use, and save and send that document for someone to use as a fill-in form. Depends upon the level at which you need to go and what your specific needs are. And so today I've chosen to incorporate in the part of having a template that has all the parts built in that people could create a document from. But in the process, you've also learned about the controls. And here's the next part. Since this is a template that I have, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to save this as, this is what you would do. You would be performing a save as, and then you would have to choose where it goes. I'm going to choose custom word templates, which is really where it will default to if it's not mine's already a template. So here's the clarification. If you open up a Word document, blank document, and you begin the creation of your template complete with your controls, in order for it to become a template, you will have to do a changing of the Save As type, which I've already done this here, and that's why it's defaulting to custom Word templates. But down at the bottom where it says Save As type, yours would be a Word document if you're starting from scratch, and you would need to then choose that it should be a Word template. And in my case, I'm using Office 2013, and the default directory on my system is custom Word templates. You might be working with a different version of Microsoft Word, and the directory structure may be different for you. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and click Save. I'm just saving out over the old with the new. Now, keep in mind that when you are ready to modify the template, you will have to open the template. You don't want to open a document you've created from the template. You want to open the template. And when you're opening a template, you can go to the File tab and choose Open. And I'm choosing Computer and getting to my folder that it defaults to, which is Custom Word Templates. And or wherever you choose to store your templates, because you're not locked down to using what the default directory is. So wherever your templates are, you would reopen the template to make your modifications and then save out over that template with your new changes. And so now I promised I would go over legacy fields. So let me do that for us. Now remember, the point of legacy fields is for backward compatibility. If you don't have a need for backward compatibility, then you can work with everything that you've seen today. And that's really the focus today anyway, is for you to work with the newer versions of Office. But here's where they are. I won't be going over the full detail of utilizing, just to make you aware of where they're at. It's very similar to what you've already learned, but these legacy controls, when you need to use them, I'll get to a new document here, or use one of the practice ones. Here we go. Legacy controls are, it's going to be the last button in the controls. Looks like a suitcase. And when you click the down arrow for legacy controls, then you get the form controls that can be utilized in your new version, as well as for the backward compatibility. So see, there's one for ABC, that's just a text field. The one for a checkbox, which you saw demonstrated earlier in the content control we used. There's one for drop-down form field, inserting a frame for text, and we won't go over any of the others. The objective to the legacy form portion of your training is to make certain that you have knowledge of why you would want to use them and where they are in your new versions of Word. Okay, make sure I'm not missing anything. I could go over many things with you, but let me just make certain. Oh yes, there's one other thing I wanted to show you. One other content control. Example here, or in any document you're working with, as you set these controls up in your form, you also have the option from controls in the top row to put in a picture content control. You might want to have an option for someone to insert a logo or whatever the picture is. Then if you choose picture content control, it's in the top row, third from the left, then you will have a control that in the future, of course, you'll use properties to change the name, just like you saw earlier. Then in the future, when someone's working within that form, then all they have to do is point to the picture icon, and when they click, they will then have the option to choose where they want to bring that picture in from, whether that be from a file that's on your computer, or in my case, I use OneDrive for cloud storage, or an image that you're searching for online. As a side note on bringing in images from online, just always make certain that they're royalty-free, they're not copyright, there's no copyright associated with them. But the main point to this is inserting a control to give someone a quick access to inserting a picture into that form. Now, to delete a control, as long as the property hasn't been set to lock the content control to keep it from being deleted, then you can just press the delete key. I'm going to click on the button, control, the control button that names the control. That selects the entire control, and then afterwards I press the delete key and the control is gone. So if you are where you can't delete one, you probably have set the property to prevent the deletion. So what I'd like to do right now is do a quick recap of what you've learned, because you've learned a lot so far. Number one is when the time comes for you to create a form, you certainly can start from scratch with a document. Two, which I didn't mention earlier, but you'll have to lay out how you want your form to look. You're going to have to know whether or not you're going to need tables to lay out your information in a pleasing way, and then within those table cells you can insert your controls. So keep in mind that the legacy tools are there for backward compatibility. If that's not a need, then you can work with the controls that are within your Word 2007, 10, 13, etc. So remembering that from the top you have a rich content control for text. You have two text options, one rich text, one isn't. You just learned that you could insert a picture control, and then the checkbox control, which is just a simple matter of you want to give someone the ability to select an option by check marking it. The combo box versus the list box, and from those you can put in a list of choices. It's just that the one control allows you to have users enter what they want, which is the combo box, or just a list, and they're restricted to only what's within the list. Date picker, we covered that. Date picker produces a calendar date selector when the user enters that form. And then we also went over repeating a section control, and the purpose of that again is you've created a control, maybe gone to a lot of trouble to get it created because you formatted it, did several things to it, and you also want to give a person more options, so you want them to be able to enter maybe more text. So once the control is in, our example was the rich content control, then choosing repeat control would give the user an option to click a plus sign and get another control to enter information within. And on the last review part, remembering that if you don't want anyone to make any changes to anything in the form, you want them to be able to go only to the controls that you've added throughout the form, you're going to have to restrict the editing, and that too is from the developer ribbon, which is the restrict editing. And the option that we chose, and the option you need to choose, would be the allow only this type of editing, and the default is set to no changes, read only. Mine wasn't there earlier because I'd already worked with that template. And you would choose from the down arrow and choose filling in forms, and then you'll have to click yes, start enforcing protection. So is your head spinning? And that's your Forms 101 today. And I'm open for questions.
Excellent. Thank you, Donna. One of the things, and you may have touched on this, but I'd like to actually see it for myself as well, and I know we had a couple of questions that kind of tie into this. So we can create a template, but if I want to create a form that I need to send out to all of my employees or to people to actually complete and send back to me, how do I save, edit, and send the form as a form that somebody can fill information into and return?
Well, as far as sending and returning, if you didn't want it to be a template, I'm assuming well, I'll answer it two different ways. It doesn't have to be a template for someone to use it. So, for example, in my document, I could place in fact, let me use this one, because one of those files you sent, Julie, is not a template. And so these practice files that come with your handout, the Student Weekly Progress Report, it's not a template. It's a document that's made up of tables. And all I would have to do is have in the information that I wanted and then the appropriate controls that I need. And then I can save that as a document, just a regular document, and send it to them, and they would be able to click in each control, filling out what you want them to fill out.
If I wanted to change like the enter full student name so that it showed up as red or blue or a different color so it stood out a little bit more for where people actually need to enter text or information, is there a way to format it so that it will be visible differently?
Right, and I agree. It just blends in the way it is right now. It just blends in with everything else. I'll select the control by just clicking inside. And then from the controls group, I can choose properties, and I can choose one option. It's not the only option. One option is I could choose a color for that, or go into design mode here. In fact, let me see. Let me go back to properties. Would you want maybe well, let's see if this would be what you want. I understand what you're saying. But see, that's still not giving you what you need, because if I click out, it still says enter full name. So let me look at the properties.
Can you just highlight that text and then go back over to the home ribbon and do like, blue or red or green or other color for the text?
Right. Yeah, exactly. There's another option too that I was looking for, where you can put in a shaded field where it's distinctive in that it's a shaded look versus the other. But if you want to go with just conventional methods of formatting, then you can do exactly what you just asked. And I can come back here and choose a bold and color if I want. So yes, I can do that too.
Perfect. Okay, well, we have several questions that kind of tie into the legacy controls, so let me field them all together, and then you can answer them one by one, or we can go back, and that way it maybe gives you a better sense of what this is. The first person asked to define backward compatibility.
I sure will.
As it relates to legacy controls. And then the next question was, can you go back and forth within the legacy field and regular control entry? I noticed the properties option with legacy control is much different.
It is much different because it's working with old versions of Microsoft Word. Those controls, or those fields that we're using, they're called content controls now. But in answer to the legacy part, I'll start with that one first. If I were saving my form out as a lower version that's lower than Word 2007, and lower to that, if you ever do a file save as and you choose save as type, you'll see there's a Word 97-2003 option. So if I were creating that form for use for a user that is still working with Microsoft Word 2003, then it's problematic to try to use the content controls of the newer versions, and I would want to use the legacy form fields is what I would have to do. And yes, there is a difference in what's involved because everything's been revised. So if you wanted to, if you had that need, then I would need to train you how to work with those properties for those fields.
Okay, and then the follow-up to that is if you don't enter something, if you don't create your form with the legacy controls, but someone has an older version, will they still have the options, or will it show up jumbled or unable to be completed?
I believe, if my memory serves me correctly, I believe it shows up as static text. So
they would know that there was supposed to be information that should be entered, but they wouldn't be able to get it entered.
Depending upon the content control, they may not be able to enter anything because it's working with an old version. And, you know, those of you in the audience who are like Julie and I, and you've worked with Microsoft Word versions for, you know, every new version, it's quite a difference between Microsoft Word 2003 and Word 2007, because that was where the big change came, was in Office 2007. That's when we got the ribbon.
Perfect. Okay, and then this question is, what's the difference between a display name and value in the combo box list?
Okay, let me go back to that. See if I can do one in here real quick. I'll just pop one in here. I think it's better to see it. All right, let's see. The question was about combo box, right?
The difference between a display name and value in the combo box list.
All right. I'm putting one in here. I'm going to go to the properties, because that's where I would add the items. I'm not putting in a title for time's sake, but down at the bottom, this is where the question, this is what the question is concerning. Down at the bottom, drop down list properties and add. And I'll do one more. Oh, it's because I already have one named Facebook. Okay. Right, and we'll choose OK. I'm going to go ahead and choose Facebook. I believe that the value has to do with the stored value. I'll double check that. When I say stored value, you can connect your forms to databases, as in Access databases. So I believe that, and I'll double check for us, but I believe that has to do with the stored value if I were connecting this to a database. And I'll double check that and send that to Julie. Because by display, it's only displaying what I put in the list. Properties, so I'll go back where you can see. So the only thing that's going to display on the screen is what I have in that first box. But I feel like the value is what gets stored. And I don't have this connected to anything, and I will double check that for us. And if a tutorial is needed, I'll create that too.
Perfect. And I think this is our last question. She says, Donna showed us how we could not change the content of our document. The document went right to the controls. Is there no way to change the content after putting in controls?
Not if you, how do I want to say this? The part where I chose stops to restrict the document. The sole purpose of the restriction is so that no one can make any changes. They can only do entry, perform entry into the controls. Now, if you haven't password protected that, then that person can go and turn off the protection and then make editing changes within the body of the document. You'd have to educate your user to that, you know, if you want to make some text changes or changes to things that are not controls, I have this protected, and you'll need to stop the protection. Hope that answers that. You want to restate? Does that?
And if it doesn't, we can. This person can certainly drop us an email or connect with us directly to get more specifics.
I can demonstrate it on the screen real quick.
She said yes, it does.
Okay, good.
We got it.
Okay, good.
All right. Perfect. Well, I think that's all we have for questions in the queue. So as we always encourage you to do at the end of each one of these sessions, be sure to use the samples that we sent, and we will also send them with the replay link if you didn't get a chance to download them or the links didn't come through for some reason. And test out some of the things that you've learned today. Come up with a sample form to send to a couple of colleagues so you can test it out and see how it works, and just do something fun and educational to give yourself an application to apply the knowledge from today's webinar and be able to utilize these more productively in your day-to-day environment going forward. So I would like to thank each of you for being here and for sharing your time with us today. We hope that you've come away with some new skills and some new abilities in creating useful forms in Microsoft Word. That concludes today's webinar. Thanks again for participating, and we look forward to seeing you in class again very soon. Have a productive afternoon, everyone.